we have 18 people operating our scanners. We get a lot done. I mean, we're 12 to 15 lakh pages every month. And not only that, because we make the scanners, we know how to scale this up, right? So if someone comes to us and says, gosh, I want to see, a scan center in Mumbai, we know how to do that, right? We'll build more scanners, hire more staff. And so we're at the, what a venture capitalist would call, we've made it through the seed stage, right? We've got a viable product. People love it. And if we have more capital, we can expand.
Scale.
Right,
Yes.
We're ready to go. So that's kind of where servants of knowledge is. It's a reason I have made 6 trips to India this year. Knowledge has been colonized, and scientific knowledge is a good example. And India is now spending $715 million with Reed Elsevier and
6,000 crores.
Yeah, it's huge. It's huge. And knowledge has become colonized. And if we want to see a public library of India, it's going to have to happen here. Right? It's not going to be Google isn't going to scan books in 100 different languages all over this vast country. It's going to have to be done in India, and it's going to have to be done organically here.
Namaste. Welcome to another edition of Sangam Talks and my sit-down sessions with different personalities from all over the world. I have Carl Malamud today. He's a public resource activist and runs a nonprofit in the US called public.resource. You can look at public.resource.org. And he has helped open source and sort of put up online all sorts of US law, right from building codes to law court judgments to all sorts of things. And he's sort of also replicating that in India via a Section 8 formed last year called Servants of Knowledge. And I came across one of their videos, which is how I sort of got in touch. And here we are. We ended up, Carl was in Delhi for 2 days. And so here we are talking to Carl. And let's see where this conversation goes. I have a lot of notes on my table, like always. Carl, welcome. Thank you. It would be lovely to understand a little bit about yourself. How did you get into sort of being an activist for opening up knowledge, everything from, you mentioned from law to, you've been a podcaster, you've been an author. So tell us a little bit about yourself first before we get down.
So in the 1980s, I was a hardcore computer geek. I was writing professional reference books about computer networks and databases. Okay. I did a 3-volume series on networking, for example. As part of that, I needed to buy the standards that networks were based on. And at the time, it was the International Standards Organization and the International Telecommunication Union. And I was young. I was in my 20s, and I was spending thousands of dollars to buy these standards to understand how audio compression works, how data transmission over copper wires works. And I thought, this is nuts. This is nuts. And I was writing about proprietary networks like DECnet, right, and NovelNet and things of that sort. And as part of that, I kept coming across this thing called TCP/IP, which are the fundamental protocols on which our current internet is based. And those protocols were open standards. They were available. You could download them for free. And it was interesting because in the late 80s, there were 2 internets. There was one called Open Systems Interconnect, which the good and the great, the Defense Department of the US and the European Commission and the International Standards Organization, they spent billions of dollars, and this was going to be the internet. It was going to be it. And then on the other side, there was this ragtag group of engineers called the Internet Engineering Task Force, and it wasn't even like an association or anything. It was technically what's called an unincorporated association, which means, you go to a coffee shop, you have a meeting.
Association of people. Yeah.
And ours wasn't supposed to win, but our open standards made all the difference. It really did, because what happened when the internet was first codified, the TCP protocol was issued by 2 guys named Vint Cerf and Bob Kahn. Vint Cerf is widely considered the father of the internet. The internet didn't work. And that's because the TCP protocol, the transmission control protocol, it was a way of like having a connection with you. And so I send you a packet and you acknowledge it. I send you another one, you acknowledge it. Now, here's what happens when the network wasn't working. I send you a packet, I don't hear the acknowledgement. So I send you again. I don't hear it. I send it to you again. And the network is sick, but now we're like dumping on top of it. Right, so it wasn't working. And there was this guy at University of California at Berkeley that looked at it and said, wait a minute. And he came up with a 12-line patch that said, here's the deal. If you didn't get the acknowledgement, you wait a minute, then you send it again. If you don't hear back, you wait 2 minutes, and then you send it again. It's called the back-off algorithm. And by doing that, when the network was sick, everyone would back off, the network would heal itself, and it would start working again. And so the internet started working because of, I believe, open protocols. I think that's why ours scaled. It's why Tim Berners-Lee, he's asked often, why didn't you get a patent on the World Wide Web? And his answer is, it wouldn't have worked if I'd done that. It worked because it was an open protocol. His web server wasn't that great, but some people at the University of Illinois came up with Netscape, and all of a sudden, wow, the web was amazing. So open protocols. So that taught me a lot about like what works on things. And then later on, after I started Internet Talk Radio, we were the first radio station on the internet. I quote, invented podcasting.
Oh, really?
It wasn't an invention, it was a hack.
I know.
It was a hack, but somebody came along and got a patent on it later on, and we beat it back. Said, no, we were there first. But as part of running Internet Talk Radio, we also started looking at government databases. We were a nonprofit.
And that was also in the tech space?
Yeah, it was tech. It was tech.
Tech,
So no, it was a radio station on the internet. It was Geek of the Week was my podcast, and we did live
so
streaming.
It was with techies.
Oh yeah. Oh, Geek of the Week. My guests were like Tim Berners-Lee and people like that. And it's like, so Tim, you've got this new thing, and I was skeptical of the web. I didn't think it would work. I didn't think it would scale.
Okay.
So I asked him a lot of hard questions. But as part of that,
It'd be interesting to go back and listen to those.
They're online. They're online.
Yeah.
Go to the RT-FM collection at the Internet Archive.
Very nice.
They're all there.
It would be lovely to listen to some of those.
But as part of that, we were doing a lot of internet demos. Right? 1993 was early on, and so we did a demo before the U.S. Congress. Sun Microsystems was there, and we were showing live streaming and all the the future is here. And the chairman of the committee called me back in and afterwards, and he said, I'm chairman of the Telecommunications and Finance Subcommittee, and I want to know why the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission database is not online. These are like the annual reports of companies, of public companies, IPOs, all that kind of stuff.
So they were also hidden? They were also
at the
behind
time,
the paywall?
the government had a public-private partnership, and so they had a vendor that did value added, and then they sold it to retailers who did value added, and then it cost like $30 for each annual report. So if you were an investigative journalist, right, you'd need thousands of dollars to pull all the annual reports. And he asked me, why isn't it online? And I looked at it, and I was a database guy. I had done Ingress in the early days. I wrote the first README for Postgres, which is a relational open source database. I said, I don't know, it seems easy enough. And so I got follow this line here, I got a grant from the National Science Foundation to buy the data from the SEC and put it online. So I got the government to give me money to give to the government to give away the data to the American people. And the SEC hated this, and the industry really hated it. Huge letters to Congress saying, oh my God, you can't do this.
Why?
Oh, you're competing with the private sector, because they were selling these things.
Okay.
And so I put them online, and this is like January '94, it went online. We started getting 1 million hits a day on this thing. The argument was that why should we subsidize Wall Street fat cats that can afford $20 a report? Well, our users weren't Wall Street fat cats. They were college students and journalists, and so we got 1 million hits a day. And after running it for about 1.5 years, I put a note on the net that said, this service will terminate in 60 days. It's not my job to do this, it's the government's job. Okay. Click here to write, email to Al Gore, who had email at the time. Click here to write mail to the Speaker of the House, who had email. The chairman of the SEC did not, and so we created a mailbox form. 17,000 people wrote in saying, oh my God, you can't terminate this. And so we printed all 17,000 of them out and brought them down to the SEC. And it finally got to the chairman. And before then it was the computer guys. And the chairman looked at it and he goes, well, how much does it cost to run this? I said, well, it costs us $300,000, sir. It'll cost you $1 million. And so he called the Wall Street Journal that night and said, this is our job to do it. And then the chief of staff called me the next day and said, we can't do this in 60 days. We're government. I said, tell you what, I'll loan you computers. So I loaned them computers. I donated the source code. We configured their internet line. They were up and running. And then something magic happened. The computer guys were able to go to their bosses and say, well, this little computer they give, that's just not enough. We need the 16 processor and so they got great toys to play with. They were now running the busiest website in the federal government, so they embraced the thing. And then the industry guys came up to me and said, Carl, we thought you were going to put us out of business, but our business went up. And the reason was, if you're like a day trader or something, you might use my thing, but then you get serious, you want to have the back file and this and that. And so we vastly increased the size of the audience. And that's been my method of doing things ever since.
Beautiful. And this whole philosophy of how actually opening up data increases the value for everyone, private parties. I didn't know about all this, but your area of work, or for example, the Wall Street area of work of putting up public companies' data online, their annual reports and all, and how that added to the industry. But I knew about this with climate data. I forget the name of the company which built a multi-billion-dollar company on top of US climate data. I'm forgetting the names.
Oh, they're Weather Underground, and then IBM's also in that business, weather.com. Yeah, both of them are.
Yeah, but these guys got into insurance, with US crop data, soil data. US government, I believe.
AccuData, I believe, is the name of them.
Maybe?
Something like that. Yeah.
The US government opened up all sorts of data.
Yeah.
And here, back then, I'm talking about what, 10, 12 years back. And when I looked at the Indian government and, what sort of, for example, monsoon patterns and is data on the monsoons available online, and nothing was available online because it was all classified in the negative list. It was terrible. I thought, here is a real example of opening up data, and you're making billions of dollars of companies on top of that data. It's serving everybody. Farmers are getting, into new business because of insurances being available, better low-priced insurance being available. And here, the Indian government was hiding everything behind an
Yeah, it's infrastructure. Part of it is just inertia, people not understanding how technology changed. Yeah. And so we do a show by doing, right? We look for a situation which is bad, in which the data's there, maybe it costs some money, and then we put it online, and then we go to like the ministers and the members of Congress, and they understand a million hits a day, right? They understand like people really want this stuff. Yeah. They also understand the economics, right? If my very small nonprofit can do it, then surely the government can do it. And look at all the downstream things that happen, all the benefits. This data is infrastructure in our modern age, right? Patents, intellectual.
This data is infrastructure.
Yeah,
what a nice
standards. All these things. They're not commodities. They're not things you sell. They are things that enable economic activity. The reason we have public filings of public companies is to make our markets transparent and efficient. It's not to have a $300 million industry selling $20 documents, right? We're talking, tens and hundreds of billions of dollars of economic activity are enabled by these things.
Superb. So what next? Come to the next phase. What happened after this? Once you made some of this data available, how has your journey been after that?
Well, so
you got into India, into the Sabarmati Ashram, Nehru Archives, all of that. So help us share a little bit about.
I ran the Internet Multicasting Service, the radio station in the 90s. We did a World's Fair on the internet. We did a bunch of things, and then the dot-com boom hit, and I couldn't get a nonprofit funded. It's just everybody was like they wanted to invest in companies and stuff like that. And so I did a couple of stints in Washington. I worked at the Center for American Progress, which is a think tank, and I helped revamp their computers. In 2007, I decided I'd move back to California, and I started Public Resource. And Public Resource initially was focused on making the law available. And I didn't do that in the 90s. Patent database I could do, our official gazette we could do, but law was hard. It was big multinational.
And all these databases were searchable as well?
What's that?
Were they searchable?
Yeah. So
what does making it available mean?
Well, it means putting it on the internet. So two things can happen. A, they were searchable and you can find what you're looking for and you could read it. But everything we did, it you could download it in bulk. And my theory is there's always somebody smarter than me on the internet. And so any database I put on, anybody who wants to can download the whole thing and they can do a better version of it.
Right.
And that's what I mean by available. It's both online so anybody can access it, right? End user service. But, end user service, we do the best we can. But a large organization that, focused on like SCC is always going to do a better job than us.
Got
Always.
But that's a nice philosophy. You don't find a perfect solution, you find a good enough solution, and then somebody better comes along and makes it better.
Yeah, it's show by doing. Show by doing, and I'm always very clear, this is not my job to do it. I'll do it, but I'd rather that people, do it that should be doing it. So I started Public Resource, and we focused on the law, which, believe it or not, in the United States, many states have copyrighted their state laws and given exclusive rights to sell them to selected vendors. And I thought that was nuts. So I started buying like the official
Why
code.
would they do that? I mean, law, why would they do that? No idea.
Well, the money is one reason. Control. It's so in the world of books, when the law was being published in books, it kind of made sense to have an official publisher who sold the books for a sort of reasonable amount of money. Right? And that's the way it used to be. And then when the internet came along, two things happened. First of all, prices skyrocketed on print things. And then the electronic things, which should have been a lot cheaper, were dreadfully expensive. So if you subscribe to LexisNexis or, for the law or Westlaw, and you have similar services in India, a lot of money. It meant that the U.S. Court of Appeals opinions were just not available anywhere. And so we started buying state laws and scanning them and putting them online. We were sued by the state of Georgia for posting the official code of Georgia annotated, right? Seal of the state of Georgia on each volume, copyright state of Georgia, all rights reserved. So I scanned them and I put them online. I did a lot of research on the law before then just to understand what was going on. And then, I've learned a lot about how to do this by reading about civil resistance. Gandhi, Martin Luther King, Nelson Mandela, people like that. And one of the lessons is you don't sneak around, right? So before Gandhi decided to go make salt, he wrote a letter to the viceroy. Dear friend, I'm going to make salt. I don't have to make salt. You can just get rid of the tax. So I sent a copy of the official code of Georgia annotated on a peanut thumb drive to the Speaker of the House of the Georgia House and to the Attorney General. You will be delighted to know your laws are available. Well, they were not delighted to know, big nasty takedown notices, and correspondence went back and forth, and they sued me in the U.S. District Court, accused me of a practice of terrorism, and that was a dreadful mistake on their part because the press loved that. They had pictures of me in a suit and tie testifying before Congress, local man accused of terrorism for posting the laws. And what I love about my issue is I can explain it in 1 minute to someone on the other side, so why is it copyright? Why does it cost money? And they have this big, there is no free lunch explanation. So they sued me. We lost, U.S. District Court. We appealed. We won in the Court of Appeals. The state of Georgia applied for the Supreme Court to hear the case. In the U.S., you have to have permission. And they took the case, and the Supreme Court sided with me. They said these are edicts of government, which means that if it is the law and legal materials, it doesn't have to just be black letter law. It was the annotations to the law, but if it's issued in the name of the state is not eligible to have copyright. This is before the Copyright Act. It's in it's a constitutional issue of freedom of speech and due process. And it was a 200-year-old common law doctrine, so it wasn't a statutory interpretation. So we won that one. The other thing we were doing, and this is sort of what brought me to India, is we started looking at building codes and electrical codes. And all over the world, they're copyrighted. They're required by law. They are the law, right? But they're copyrighted and they're dreadfully expensive. And we looked at the situation in the US, and I started buying all the building, electrical, fire codes for the country, all the other things incorporated in federal law, the law for safety of ladders, the law for, food supply, for testing for lead. Several thousand of these standards were part of the US Code of Federal Regulations, and everyone agreed they were the law, but they were all copyright some private standards body. And most of the standards bodies, when they write these things, like the electrical code, they want them to be the law. I mean, that's the whole point. So I posted them all, and I was sued by 6 standards bodies in US federal court. And the litigation went on for 10 years.
That happens in the US as well, 10 years.
Oh, absolutely. And so my lawyers all work for me for free and pro bono. But I asked for a pro forma invoice at the end of the year, and I was booking over $1 million a year in legal help on this case. And again, we lost at the district court, went to the Court of Appeals. They sent it back to the district court, went back to the Court of Appeals, and the US Court of Appeals said, no, the law is of overriding public importance. It is fair use. Carl's non-profit, non-commercial use is allowed. And we did the same thing in Europe, where we asked for mandatory toy safety standards from the European Commission, safety of playgrounds, safety of baby pacifiers, and the Commission said, no, you can't have them, they're copyright. And again, dreadfully expensive, hundreds of dollars for these documents. But they were harmonized standards, which means that the European Commission published a notice in the official journal, and every country in Europe had 6 months to transpose them into national law. It's all about a unified market. So we lost I initially lost in the German courts when they sued me, and there's a federal German injunction out against me for the baby pacifier standard, right? If I were to post that, that would be a 200,000 euro fine. But then we continued. We asked for the European Commission, went to the European Court of Justice. They ruled against us, and we appealed. Then something magic happened. The court assigned a constitutional bench to hear our case, 15 judges. It was a 4-hour oral argument with translation into 12 languages. And they came out with an opinion and said, no, these are the law. Harmonized standards are part of EU law. And it doesn't matter. So there are exceptions to the Public Records Act in Europe if it's copyright, if it's personal information, national security. But if the matter is of overriding public importance, none of the exceptions apply. And that's what the court ruled. You would think with that decision, we'd be done, but the European Commission didn't like the decision. Just like in the US, the standards bodies are fighting it. So despite the highest courts in the land winning, siding with us, we're still in the trenches, right? We just filed suit against...
right now as well?
Oh, we refiled suit against the European Commission because they wouldn't give us the standards. They put them in a readability room, and the readability room is a website. You have to click to agree to the terms of use. You can't download, you can't save, you can't print, which is not what you can do. The law, you can, this isn't about reading the law, it's about speaking the law. It's about being able to take the law and reformatting it in a better way, right? So it works for the blind, for example. And same thing's happening in the US. We had a very nice court win, but the standards bodies are fighting it tooth and nail. This is not unusual. In the United States, we had a court decision called Brown v. Board of Education, which is all about schools cannot be separate but equal, they must be integrated. This is a 1954 decision. Fundamental, seminal case. Thurgood Marshall argued it, later became a Supreme Court justice. He won that in 1954, but for the next 10 years, he had a team of 100 lawyers in the field trying to convince the states to let them integrate the schools. And we're kind of in that situation. India was very different. In India, we posted all 19,000 Indian standards online. And the reason was, so in the US and Europe, these are ostensibly private bodies that produce the standards. They're told by government to do it. They're sometimes paid by government to do it, but they're officially a nonprofit. The Bureau of Indian Standards is a governmental agency, right? It's overseen by, several ministers. There's a whole bunch of, there's so many secretaries and deputy secretaries there. And so I bought them all, put them on the internet, ran them for a year, very, very popular, because they had never been available. And then, it came time to renew our sales invoice with the Bureau. And so I sent them a letter back and said, you'll be delighted to know your standards are, and so they cut me off. With 2 Indian co-petitioners, we filed a PIL in the High Court of Delhi. That went on for 7 years. Just kept, yeah, I mean, first time government didn't show up, and then there's supposed to be, when you sue in India, you sue the agency and the union government. And so the next time a lawyer showed up in the high court, and the Chief Justice says, who are you representing, the union government or the Bureau? And the young lawyer says, I don't know, your lordship. And so the judge sent him home to find out who his client was. But then something magical happened a couple of years ago. The Bureau started making them all available for free.
By themselves?
Yeah, they have a restriction on it that says non-commercial use only, but anyone can go to the Bureau and search and then download them. And so we went to the Chief Justice and said, this is what we wanted in the first place, is can we drop our suit? And he said, get out of here. And so we did an RTI on the Bureau and asked them, what happened. It turns out that, first of all, their revenue went way up because, we had all the standards online and people were discovering it. And if you're serious, you probably went and bought it. Their expenses also went way up. And the ministry said, this is stupid, you're losing money. And they said, just give them away.
Super. What a nice story.
Yeah, isn't it
what
nice?
a nice story.
Yeah.
You've been trivializing it. Magic happened, but I guess it's just inspiring, right? You start
I sent a
working
nice
on-
letter to the director of the Bureau saying congratulations. I wrote an op-ed in a newsletter that's heavily read by government officials talking about how congratulating the Bureau for promoting safe in India as well as make in India.
Awesome. When was this?
Oh, this is a couple of years ago.
A couple of years ago. Okay, recent. Very nice.
Yeah.
Superb. Congratulations. So let's come to your India story in that case.
Okay.
So from BIS you went on to...
Well, I was coming to India fairly frequently, and I started stopping by government bookstores like the Publications Division, and they have amazing stuff. And I would just buy everything, bring it home and scan it. Sabarmati Ashram had been working for years on an electronic version of the collected works of Mahatma Gandhi, but they didn't know what to do with it. And a guy I know well, Sam Petroda, called me up one day, and I went to see him, and he shows me a USB, and what's on it? He goes, collected works of Mahatma Gandhi. And I said, oh. He goes, here. I said, well, can I post it? And he goes, sure. And so I did. I posted it online, and at first the ashram was a little bit taken aback because everyone's like, "What should we do with this?" And they were worried people would take the works, the words of Gandhi, out of context. They'd pull out one page and cherry pick it. And I had long talks with them about it, and finally they understood that having an authoritative version online, people were always going to screw it up. People were always going to
They could screw up a book as well.
No,
Scan a page.
totally. But by having the authoritative version online, there was a place they could point to. And you could always check if you saw a Gandhi quote. And so with my collection, it's on the Internet Archive. You can search inside the text. So you can, for example, search for a Gandhi quote. Now, here's a fun one. You can search for "Be the change you wish to see."
Very common.
Gandhi never said that.
Gandhi never said that?
Gandhi never said that. It was in a biography about Gandhi. And so if you search my Hind Swaraj collection, so I started with collected works, and then I started buying every Gandhi thing I could find. Navi Jivan Trust, pamphlets and all that, and biographies. And Richard Attenborough, who made the Gandhi movie, when he passed away, he had a huge Gandhi library. One of his producers got it. Okay. And he called up the ambassador and said, what should I do with this? And the ambassador said, give it to Carl. And so I put a lot of that online. And so I have this huge Hind Swaraj collection. It's also got all the works in there, the whole selected works, both series. It's got the collected works of Ambedkar, the Patel correspondence, Desai diaries.
So you've clubbed all of that under the Hind Swaraj.
That's the Hind Swaraj collection.
Got it. So it's not only Gandhi, but also...
No, it's Liberation of India, broadly read. A lot of stuff in there. And that's what kind of got me started on this Public Library of India. But as I was coming over more and more and more, I had met a lot of people who ended up co-founding Servants of Knowledge with me. My friend Om Shiva Prakash, for example, has been working for a huge period of time digitizing Kannada literature. He's also a Wikipedian. He helped Mozilla. He's a free and open source guy. Very talented sysadmin. He had a job supervising 50 engineers doing very fancy outsourcing.
When I saw the video, I asked I ran a business, a software business, and one of my, almost a CTO of the company, he actually is friends with Shivu. as he calls him. So
Yeah.
we just contacted him, and I guess you're going to do something bigger with whatever your project is. Sorry, just an interruption. Go ahead.
Well, so something kind of funny happened because I kept buying all these books, and I because of the standards and the work I do, I've met a lot of ministers and important people, both sides of the fence. My work's nonpartisan, but a guy I know named Jairam Ramesh, who you may know, Congress Party spokesman. I was seeing him one day, and he says, "Oh, you're going to Bangalore? You must meet this guy Mohandas Pai." Who is, of course, other side of the political spectrum. And so I went and met Mohan, and I went and saw him on a subsequent trip, and I was bragging to him. I said, "Look, I got 100 kilos of books, and I'm shipping them to the U.S. to scan them." And Mohan just started yelling at me. He said, why aren't you scanning them in India? And I said, "Well, these are real high-end scanners, and we don't have one here." And he said, "This is nuts. You should be able to do it here." And so I went to Brewster Kahle at the Internet Archive and said, I want a scanner. And these are big scanners. These are expensive, big frames, multiple cameras on them.
Same scanners, those are that are
the
there on
ones
the
you saw in
video?
our video. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Brewster at first was like, "Oh, don't do that."
Where were these manufactured? In the U.S.?
So Brewster Kahle was making them for the Internet Archive. He's got a huge scanning operation.
Got it.
He's got 50 scanners in the Philippines and all over. And I think he was making them in China, but it was his design. But I had him ship me one, and I knew the Indian Academy of Sciences because I'd helped put them online. And I asked them if I could put the scanner in their basement. So that became our first headquarters in India. And Om Shiva Prakash and his brother started operating the scanner. And so we were scanning science books for a CSRI lab, but we were also, doing Kannada literature and other things. And
So he was doing scanning before that via normal scanners? or
no,
phone
flat
pictures of the flat scanner?
flat tops and stuff like that.
It's like
But these are
huge manual labor.
Yeah, these are much more sophisticated. Our scanners are they're fairly expensive, but what we do is we put the book in a cradle, and then the cradle goes up to the glass, it takes picture, you let it down, you flip a page. And once you know what you're doing, you can do 500 pages an hour that way. But then there's a whole workflow after that, right? Raw scans have to be cropped and de-skewed and de-warped.
That's all manual work?
No, there's so we've been using the Internet Archive to do what's called repub. It takes the raw scans and the metadata and runs them through OCR and turns them into PDFs. But for a long time, Internet Archive wasn't doing Indian languages for their optical character recognition. And so Sushant Sinha and I, he's our third co-founder. Sushant is a PhD in computer science. He is the founder of Indian Qanun, which is all the court cases and laws and regulations of India. And I've known Sushant since he started Indian Qanun. He actually was an engineer at Yahoo and wanted to give something back to his country. And he saw what I was doing in the US, and so he said, "Well, I'm going to put court cases online."
Oh.
And so I'd known him for a long time. And so what Sushant did is he took these scans that we were uploading to the Internet Archive, pulled them down, bounced them off Google Vision, which had Indian languages, and then shoehorned them back into the Internet Archive. And we did probably 400,000 books that way. Internet Archive then started doing OCR in all the different languages, so we don't do that anymore.
And what's the accuracy of this with Indian languages?
It's pretty good. So
Tamil, Kannada,
yeah, you bet. No, you bet. A good 100 languages. So,
okay.
And it does auto detection. So even if you mislabel the language, Tesseract will actually say, "Oh, there's a 93% chance this is Kannada," or "This is Konkani in a Devangari script," or So we had a scanner at the Vishwa Konkani Center in Mangaluru, and so we did about 6,000 Konkani books, and there had not been any online before that. And so we had a scanner, Indian Academy. We added 2 more. We had one in Chennai at the Roja Muthaya Library doing Tamil, the other one in Mangaluru.
These are not portable, right?
No, you can put them in road cases and they're transportable, but they're big frames and they're on tables, and it needs to be the right table and the right size. So we had 3 of them, and so 2 things happened. One is it was hard to ship these in from the United States. We had 2 scanners were stuck in customs for a year, and just couldn't get them out. And so we were like, this is nuts. So we started making them here in India. So we reverse engineered the scanner and went to a manufacturing shop, and we now build the frames ourselves. We buy the electronics, we put them on there.
So the design of these are also open source?
Of course.
You could replicate them?
You could. Now the issue is just having a scanner, like, I mean, that's the beginning of the workflow, and so you gotta do the whole business. And we're in the process of open sourcing the entire stack. So this whole repub thing, we're actually preparing some open source software, so anyone that has raw scans can go through that process of cropping them and doing OCR and generating PDFs.
Who owns this right now? This is Internet Archive.
So right now we use the Internet Archive service to do that. So everything we do gets pushed. We actually began doing it ourselves this month. And so we're in the process of doing that. But for a long time, we would do that. So if it was a copyright book, we push them into a print disabled only collection on the Internet Archive. You have to be blind in order to be able to access it. If it's not in copyright, anybody could see it. So we had those 3 scanners. We started making them ourselves, and COVID hit, and we just couldn't keep them going in Chennai and Bengaluru, and couldn't hop on a plane. And so we brought them back in. And by that time, we'd we'd been at the Indian Academy for a while. We approached the National Law School of India University, approached the vice chancellor and said, we've got some scanners. How about if we scan your whole library? And several days later, and this is our 4th co-founder who helped put that one together, and that's Professor Lawrence Liang, graduate of NLSIU, winner of the Infosys Prize. He's the founding dean of the Ambedkar University Delhi Law School, considered the leading intellectual property scholar in the country. He also has a PhD in film studies from JNU, and he writes frequently about film for like The Hindu and publications like that. So that's the 4 of us that are doing this thing. And so Lawrence approached the VC, and we started scanning their whole library. And we were up to 12 scanners by then. And we hire the staff. And so our deal is always, we'll scan your stuff, but it's our scanners, and we hire and manage the staff, right? We could train you on how to use it, but we found in the past that if you put 3 scanners over in some library and you train people, at first they're real enthusiastic, and then the things just sit there. And ours are like every day, we're scanning and we're using them effectively. So we scanned the entire 30,000 books of the National Law School of India University. And then Gandhi Bhavan approached us and said, this is, right in downtown Bangalore, and said, could you scan our library? And so we shoehorned about 6 scanners in there, and we started scanning their library, and we noticed they had a huge unused auditorium space, and said, can we have that? And they said, sure. And we ended up scanning all 11,000 of their books. And so we recently did something very special.
So is this not a duplication effort in some ways with what Google has been doing with their?
Oh, sort of. There's a couple differences. So first of all, our scanning is higher quality. Google's 300 dots per inch. We're 600.
Okay.
And Google, you can't download the books, right? They're scanning.
That is correct. Of course.
Well, with ours, if they're public domain, we just make them available. If they're not public domain, here's what we did with the Gandhi Library. We in August. And it was a 75th anniversary of the Gandhi Smarak Nidhi program. And they called a big international conference. We had organizations from all over India coming down to Bangalore. We presented each of the Gandhi organizations with a thumb drive that had the entire Gandhi library on it. But it came with a proviso. And this presentation wasn't just me, it was me, the Minister of Law and Parliamentary Affairs, H.K. Patil of Karnataka, and Justice Hegde, retired Supreme Court Justice. And we presented to these organizations, said, look, you are the trustee of this knowledge. You may use it for the purposes allowed under Indian law. And those purposes are, so these things are copyright, right? So I can't sell them, obviously. But if you are blind, even if it's copyright, I can make a copy and give it to you. That's an international treaty. It's called the Marrakesh Treaty. If it's in the course of your research, Section 52 of the Copyright Act of India says that is an exception to copyright. So even though it's in copyright, If you're a university professor and you're writing a paper and you need this book in the course of your research, I can give it to you. And then finally, there's in the course of instruction. There was a very famous case at Delhi University in which they have a copy shop that prepared course packs, right? And they were sued by Oxford and Cambridge, and it went to the High Court of Delhi. And the High Court of Delhi said, no, wait a minute, Section 52 of the Copyright Act says if it's in the course of instruction, that's an exception to copyright. Now, that doesn't mean the student can take that copy and sell it on the street, right? But in the course of their instruction. And so when we gave the Gandhi Library to every other Gandhi organization, we said that you are a trustee of this knowledge and you may use it for the following purposes as allowed by law. And we are replicating that model. So right now we are finishing scanning of the Lal Bagh Botanical Garden Library. They have 7,000 old and rare horticultural books. Our hope is to make that available to every horticultural researcher in India. Yeah. So
and all what languages?
Oh, we have over 100 languages. So we've done two things. We scan. We've done about a lakh book of scanning so far. But we've also harvested digital databases that were out there and combined them together. And so the government had a digital Library of India effort for many years. And that server crashed, but I made a copy before it crashed.
Where does that stand, the Digital Library of India? Is it still operational? I've never heard about it.
So that server was kind of about 2015.
So it's dead, is it?
It's dead.
Crashed
Well,
and then the
well
whole
it's totally dead. It never came back.
It never came.
Never came back. Never came. Well, they were messy about copyright. They had a whole bunch of copyright materials in there. Their scanning wasn't very good. It was a huge government effort. But some pages are missing, and other pages have a thumb on them, and the metadata's no good. And but I made a copy, and I don't know what happened, but it went down, and they couldn't bring it back up. But I put it on the Internet Archive. Did a couple things. I removed the in-copyright materials,
right?
Because there were some pretty obvious things. Yeah. The thing about the Internet Archive is if there is a copyrighted book there, you can send email to info@archive.org and boom, take it down.
It'll take it down.
Right. Okay. And so we cleaned it up, and then any remaining things that were still there, we were very responsive. The other thing is the metadata wasn't very good. And so like the Telugu books were, the titles were all Roman, they weren't Telugu script, they were Romanicized, but there's a standard for how you go from Telugu to Roman characters, and they hadn't done that. And so we had a volunteer in Hyderabad go through 20,000 Telugu books and type the titles in Telugu script. And we've done similar, we have a huge Sanskrit collection, which the government had scanned, and we have Sanskrit scholars.
Sangam Talks, I struggled for 2,100 videos to do exactly that.
The other thing we did, though, is not only did we take the Digital Library of India, there were other electronic databases online that were publicly accessible. Tamil Virtual Academy.
So, sorry, I just want to come back to the metadata. How do you do that? It's all manual intervention.
Well, so when we scan, what we do is if there's an ISBN number, we can actually pull the metadata out of the Library of Congress and places like that automatically.
But this metadata is of what kind? I mean, what is it telling you?
Well, so metadata, so if you're doing it manually, and some books don't have an ISBN, I want to see title, author. I'd rather see publisher. I'd like to see date. And you don't always
pretty
get
much
that.
About the publishing of the book.
That's what metadata is. That's what metadata. Maybe subject keywords if you're lucky.
Yeah, but that's what I was trying to get to.
Yeah.
So subject keywords, how do you get to that? That would be interesting for me as metadata.
Okay, so there are card catalog entries out there. So let's say you have a Western book that you're scanning. It's got an ISBN number on it. You can pull the metadata out of either the WorldCat catalog or the Library of Congress, and it's going to have keywords. It's going to have publisher. It's going to have a date. It's going to have all that. Indian copyright, not all publishers did metadata properly, and not all of them, the registry for ISBN numbers in India is a government operation, and they don't necessarily have all the card catalog information there you'd like, and so you might have to do that manually. And so our philosophy is...
Perhaps a use of AI to do this? Auto-tagging?
Oh, that would be hard. Maybe, but no, that would be really hard. Because the thing about subjects, and you want them to be a controlled vocabulary, right? Because you want it so that if you say, subject, whatever, balloons, you don't want another one to be inflatables. You want, you know what I mean? And yes, AI can do equivalences. So it's hard. So our philosophy is we do the best we can. And so when we're scanning, we do the best we can. Not all of our operators are fluent in all these languages. And so then we go back in and we clean them up the best we can. And one of the things we do is on the Internet Archive, this is publicly accessible. And by the way, Internet Archive is a separate organization. They are a 501c3 nonprofit. Brewster Kahle runs it. I happen to be one of their largest users, but it's arm's length. Right? So, for example, if a book is copyright, they decide whether or not it goes down. But there's a review capability, and anyone can add a review. And what I encourage people to do is, if you see bad metadata, leave a review. Say this is a correct title. And so like a lot of the Tamil books that we harvested, Tamil Virtual Academy had bad titles on them. And probably 5-10 times a week I get a review that says no, title should be this. Yeah. And then I go back and I change the title.
That's how all open source works. People come and contribute, crowdsourcing if you like. Yeah, great.
And so the nice thing, by the way, about combining all these different, born digital things that are out there is that you can now search across the collections and you can search in Indian languages. We've also got all the official gazettes of India online. So all the states and the union government, we have 7 lock issues, I believe.
How old?
We go back maybe 10 years. So, when they were born digital, but we harvested all of them.
It's so nice to see. I just came across some absolute nonsense in one of the districts in UP, in one of the gazetteers. Absolute crap being sold. It just sort of, that crap keeps getting, moved forward. So, this was the first time I saw something like this, and there was actually Dr. Bajaj with me, who's been, writing an atlas for a district, and that's the context of why we went to this district. And because it's not available, so the same nonsense keeps getting, finding its way into another version for another year and all of that. If it was available, people would be able to point it out that this is wrong information, or very, very colonized view of how you look at yourselves. Please fix it.
Yeah, we also have many gazetteers, but the official gazettes are very important, because if something is not noticed in the official gazette, it is not a law and it's not a regulation. And it turns out there's examples of people going to court and suing over something, but that law was never actually published in the gazette, so it's not there. So we have lawyers all over India using our collection to do the research they need in order to prepare their court cases.
Superb. I mean, just fantastic work. I'm overwhelmed, really. And just tell me how. So you talked about how you get public. How do you fund this in the U.S.? I know the law firms work pro bono.
Pro bono. So we are a registered charity. So I get some individual donations.
Institutional backing?
So Arcadia is a foundation in the United Kingdom, an amazing operation. They've given away over $1 billion in the last 10 years. They are the leader in the fight for open science, right? Being able to read science properly.
Arcadia.
It's Lisbeth Rousing and Peter Baldwin are the 2 principals. And they've supported my work, and they're the primary source of support for public resource. And they've been very generous, and so that has funded me. It's funded my commercial contractors in India, right?
Same thing happens with Servants of
Knowledge? Well, the Servants of Knowledge was created this year as a Section 8 nonprofit. So we have our official nonprofit certification. We're eligible for CSR funds. And the point of that is that this public library of India, this bottom-up grassroots thing, needs to be done in India, right? It needs to be funded by Indians. We are in the process of talking to foundations and individual donors, and we're trying to get this thing up and running. So it's brand new, but it builds on 10 years of work by the people that created. So I'm not on the board of Servants of Knowledge, because I feel strongly that it should be Indian controlled. I am technically the honorary secretary, which is an unpaid position. But
we'll try and see what we can do to help Servants of Knowledge, and Shivu and the other co-founders there. We'll see what we can do.
I'm heavily involved in it.
Of course. It's an expensive operation, right? Putting all these people for scanning all these thousands of books in all the place. I mean,
we're expensive, but we're it is. So we have 18 people operating our scanners. We get a lot done. I mean, we're 12 to 15 lock pages every month, and not only that, because we make the scanners, we know how to scale this up. Right, so if someone comes to us and says, gosh, I want to see, a scan center in Mumbai, we know how to do that, right? We'll build more scanners, hire more staff, and And so we're at the, what a venture capitalist would call, we've made it through the seed stage, right? We've got a viable product. People love it. And if we have more capital, we can
Ready to
expand.
scale.
Right,
Yes.
we're ready to go. And so that's kind of where Servants of Knowledge is. It's the reason I have made 6 trips to India this year.
Wow. Okay.
I've spent 100 nights in Indian hotel rooms, and part of it is I spend a lot of time explaining what we do to people. And explaining what we do, and it's not like your commercial scan contractor you can hire. We're doing the whole soup to nuts. It's all open source. Library management systems are getting open sourced, and it's a different way of doing things, and that's something which it resonates.
Very
with
nice.
people.
I'd love to look at the stack. I'll also have a conversation like this with Shiva Prakash, and yeah, I mean, I'd love to participate here. Also, just FYI and for the audience, I'm actually working on, big ambitious goal is in the next few years actually raise 1,000 crores for civilizational causes, and we call this the Hindu Network Foundation and the Banyan Philanthropies. Under those 2 organizations, there's a board in both of the organizations, a separate board. We're trying to pay public institutions who will write checks for making grants for organizations like Servants of Knowledge, and for the
and
work
that's
that you're
vital
doing.
work, because it's knowledge has been colonized, and scientific knowledge is a good
Yes.
example. And India is now spending $715 million
Yeah,
with
6,000
Reed Elsevier and
6,000 crores.
yeah, it's huge. And knowledge has become colonized, and if we want to see a public library of India, it's going to have to happen here. Right? It's not going to be Google isn't going to scan books in 100 different languages all over this vast country. It's going to have to be done in India, and it's going to have to be done organically here.
Very nice. Thank you. On that note, thank you,
Thank you.
Carl. Lovely talking to you. Hope the audience, you enjoyed this conversation. Come forward and tell us how you can participate. That'd be lovely to join forces. Thank you very much. Thank you, Carl.